It's the Islamic spiritual tradition and the intellectual tradition to always start with the name of God. And I would proceed as such. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. To proceed. Today's debate has been an emotional debate for centuries. It has. And as Muslims, and as non-Muslims, we need to understand this. Why do I say that? Well, if we look into European history, we see this entity called the church oppressing the thinkers, oppressing the masses, burning witches because they had certain knowledge claims. They were also restricting political and intellectual thought. So as a result, we have European tendencies to be very emotional about the subject of God. For me, it's a very rational argument. And I hopefully today will be able to give some proofs or rational evidences for the existence of the Creator. But we have to understand the emotional context. Because Western atheism or Western humanism is in this deep emotional context. They have this struggle between the oppressive church and thinking and ideas and intellectual activity. Muslims, however, do not have this historical baggage. We never had the conflict between church and state. We never had the conflict between the sultan and the caliph and the people who were thinkers. We had a symbiotic relationship, which basically means the rulers affected the people positively, and the people affected the state and the political structures positively also. So we need to understand that it was an emotional debate. Hence, you had atheism arising, humanism arising, because fair enough, if I was living 300 years ago and saw the church on behalf of God oppressing the masses because people wanted to think, I would be an atheist too, and I would be a humanist too. However, hopefully, today, we could change that current discourse and make it to a positive one, but one devoid of emotions. Because emotions do not negate the existence of anything. My mom makes a moussaka, it's a Greek dish, yeah? She doesn't make it very nice at all. It's quite bad, actually. But although she puts it in front of me, I still have to eat it. Although emotionally, I don't want to eat it. So emotional arguments do not negate the fact the plate is right in front of me. So let's deal first and foremost with some of the emotional arguments that the humanists bring about. What do they say? First and foremost, they say God is not necessary. So we don't care if He exists or not. God is not necessary. Well, I don't really need George Bush in my life. And as a matter of fact, he's quite unnecessary to my life. Does that mean he does not exist? So this emotional argument that has been delivered by some humanists, such as Mike Lake from the Derby Humanist Society, he portrays this kind of emotion. Another emotion, God is irrelevant. God's irrelevant. We could make our own minds about things. But then again, does that negate His existence? No, it doesn't. Surely a 4-year-old does not care if China exists or not. It's irrelevant to the 4-year-old. But China does exist. Another argument they pose. What God? There are 800 different types of God. Who are we going to believe in? Therefore, God doesn't exist. Well, quite funny. I come actually from a Sicilian background, right? Believe it or not. Yeah? 200 years ago, my Greek village traveled from Sicily and went all the way to northwest Greece called Epirus. Yeah? So, I had to do some research about my great-great-great-great-grandfather. I came to a bizarre reality. I found out that my great-great-great-grandfather could have been potentially 5 different people. Now, because there was 5 different potential great-great-great-great-grandfathers, does that mean I never had a great-great-grandfather? Of course not. To say such a thing is absurd because I wouldn't exist today. Hence, just because we have many choices of who God is, it doesn't mean God doesn't exist. And also, another emotional argument, I believe is emotional, there is no physical evidence for the existence of God. Oh, I see. So are you saying that we need physical evidence for everything? Well, let's go back. Can we prove physically that we had a great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother? You don't have a grave. You don't have any photos. You don't have a DNA. So from that point of view, from just being an empiricist, which means you need to have touch and feel for everything, does that mean she doesn't exist? To say so would be rationally absurd. So these are some of the emotional arguments I want to clear away very quickly so we can set the context for a positive intellectual discourse. So we have all asked, what is life about? Everyone does it. I don't know who has children here. MashaAllah. And your child always asks sometimes, what we're doing here, and then you give them a good answer and they say, why? And you give them another good answer and they say, why? And there's an infinitum of whys. So we always have these questions from young age to an old age. So where did this universe come from? And why does everything exist instead of nothing? Well, typically, humanists, atheists, one of secular persuasion, they say that the universe is uncaused. It is eternal. It had no beginning, and it had no end. Just like the famous philosopher Russell, what did he say? He said the universe is just there, and that's all. However, for me, this is irrational. Because if the universe never had a beginning, that would mean that there is an infinite history of past events. I repeat, if the universe never had a beginning, or is eternal, uncaused, then our history is eternal. There is an infinite set of historical events. But can this be the case? Can we have an infinite of anything that's real? Well, infinite, from real terms, is not possible at all. And there's a general consensus amongst mathematicians and philosophers when they say the concept of the infinity leads to some glaring contradictions. For example, what is infinity minus infinity? Mathematicians have developed some assumptions, and it's in the context of the mathematical realm of discourse. Hence, these assumptions have been placed there to prevent these mathematical contradictions. Also, the famous mathematician, one of the most famous mathematicians ever lived, David Hilbert, what does he say? He says the infinite is nowhere to be found in reality. It neither exists in nature, nor provides a legitimate basis for rational thought. The role that remains for the infinite to play is solely that of our idea. So the idea of the infinite just exists in our mind. As my friend Adam once taught me, the infinite as a concept has no ontological export into the real world, which basically means in English, you can't get the concept of the infinity and place it into the real world. And because events are real, and they're not just things in our mind, then therefore, there cannot be an infinite set of past events. History cannot be infinite, because of the fact that infinite leads to glaring contradictions and absurdities in the real world. Let me give you some examples for this. I'll give you two examples. One is called the library book example, and the second is called the soldier example. Now imagine we're in Bradford University Library. Everyone's in the library. And we want to get a book. It's called the Quran. Say there was 4 people in front of you waiting for that book. Would you ever get the book? Of course, you wait 4 people on. How about if there was 400 people in front of you? Well, you would have to wait 400 people on. Now, what if there was an infinite number of people in front of you? Will you ever get the book? No. Another example, the soldier example. Say I'm a soldier, and I want to shoot the wall. Yeah? But before I can shoot, I must ask permission for the person behind me, the other soldier behind me. Can I shoot? He goes, 1 second. He has to ask the person behind him. Can I get permission so he can shoot? Then that soldier does the same thing, ad infinitum. Am I ever going to pull the trigger? No. So these are some examples to show that the concept of the infinite has no export into the real world. So the conclusion is very simple, that there is a sole cause for the universe. There's a cause for the universe because of these glaring rational contradictions. Now, according to the nature of this argument, this cause must be transcendent, which basically means beyond time, timeless, and beyond space. Because this cause created time. Stephen Hawking, what does he say? He says almost everyone now believes that the universe